have it. And item 1 is roll call.
All right, Commissioner Merker.
Here.
Chair Vincent.
Here.
Commissioner Moore.
Here.
Commissioner Oakfield. Here. Commissioner Allen.
Here.
Commissioner Martinson is absent. Commissioner Fu.
Here.
Commissioner Hauser. Here. And Commissioner Vice Chair Ghosh is absent. We have a quorum.
Well, wonderful. Yeah, we do have 2 absences, so a smaller group tonight. It's nice to see you all. I'm sorry I missed the last meeting. So item 2 is the land acknowledgement, and I'll go ahead and read it. The City of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of the Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all of the Ohlone tribes and the descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community in the West Berkeley Shell Mound, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside with us in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the City of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the City of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. The City of Berkeley will continue to build relationships with the Lijian tribe and to create meaningful actions that uphold the intention of this land acknowledgement. So thank you for listening to that and for having it on the agenda. Item 3 is order of the agenda. There are no proposals to reorder the agenda, so we will proceed with it as written. Item 4 is public comment. And this is an opportunity for the public to comment to the Planning Commission on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. So is there anyone who wishes to speak tonight on an item not on the agenda? No. Okay, so seeing none, we will move on to item 5, the planning staff report. I think planning staff, you outnumber commissioners almost tonight. So well done. This should be a hefty and long report, right?
Well, we have staff from planning and from the Office of Economic Development, who you shall be hearing from shortly. We have a few announcements. I wanted to welcome Brian Garvey, who is an assistant planner with the Land Use Division on the projects team, who's been clerking for the Zoning Adjustments Board, and he's going to be helping us out for a little bit and rotating into clerking for the Planning Commission, along with Zoe Cavello, starting next month. And also announced that Justin Horner was recently promoted to principal planner, and he will be co-secretary with myself to the PC. We're going to continue to rotate every 3 months. That might not have been apparent to you just because our colleague Grace Wu had left, and so our manager Ann Hearst was filling in a little bit, but we are rotating, and every 3 months that we have meetings, and thus Justin will be secretary for June, July, and September. No meetings in August. And that segues into my next announcement for June, in which we have 2 meetings scheduled. There's our regular meeting on June 5th. And for that meeting, the planned agenda is our housing staff and their consultants are going to present analysis and recommendations to changes to the affordable housing in lieu fee, and an associated discrete change to the the Berkeley Municipal Ordinance. Because of that, it's a public hearing, and the Planning Commission will be asked to provide recommendations to Council. The Council's also scheduled to have a work session on this on May 21st. So they're getting a preview of the analysis later this month. We're also planning to have 2 informational presentations at that meeting. Office of Emergency Services staff, who had come once before last year, will give a brief presentation about the draft local hazard mitigation plan. And also planning staff is going to present on the effort that's kicking off to update the disaster preparedness and safety element of the general plan, create a new environmental justice element of the general plan, as well as creating equitable climate resilience metrics. So you'll have that at your regular meeting. You also, in your packet, there's information about a special meeting that is scheduled for June 26th, also at 6 p.m. at this venue for a time-sensitive priority project. The information is also in your packet. And at this meeting, staff is going to be bringing the draft manufacturing research and development zoning district that was first presented for discussion and feedback, if you'll recall, in February of 2023, and the draft EIR for the zoning. And just as background, this item was ranked by council as their #1 referral and identified as a priority to be considered by council in October 2024. And June 26th is the earliest possible date to be able to bring the zoning and the draft EIR to the commission in order to provide adequate time for public comment during the EIR public comment period. And so, just so as a reminder, the meeting after that is actually July 17th because it was moved and it was in your official calendar because of the July 4th holiday. Also included, and this is my last announcement in your packet, as a late communication today was informational from Health, Housing, and Community Services. It was a flyer about a public hearing during a special city council meeting on Tuesday, May 7th from 4 to 6 p.m. The purpose of that meeting is, the public hearing is to review the proposed annual action plan for the program year 2024. And this plan includes recommendations for allocations of the Community Development Block Grant, Emergency Solutions Grant, and the Home Investment Partnership Program, or HOME funds. So that concludes my announcements.
Great. So the takeaway is enjoy this nice light mood tonight because the next 2 long weeks of life. Quick comment, or I guess request on the, so at our next meeting, one of the main agenda items is going to be that discussion around the in-lieu fee analysis by Jacobus and others.
Strategic economics.
And strategic economics. But they're going to pre-present that as at a council workshop.
That's correct. There's a work session.
Okay. Assuming there are materials available at that session for council, would you mind sending that to us? Because that's technical stuff. It might be nice to review it, have more time to review it than we often get with these.
Sure.
If you don't mind. I
Sure.
assume there'll be materials in the agenda for that. If you could remember to do that, I personally would be very thankful. Does any other commissioners have any questions or comments on the staff report items, particularly with regard to near future meetings? No? Okay. Excuse me. Is that it then?
Yes.
Okay. Chairperson's report. I do not have one tonight. Committee reports, item 7. I don't think we've had any committees. No? Okay, item 8 is approval of minutes from the last meeting, which are in the packet. Any comments or errors or questions about that? And just as a side, you are free to vote as you wish. Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve? I'll motion to approve. Actually, I won't motion to approve because I wasn't here. I usually don't do that, so I will not.
I'll move to approve.
Okay,
I'll second.
great. So Commissioner Oldfield seconded by Commissioner Howell.
Okay. Great. Commissioner Marker?
I'll abstain.
Chair Vincent?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Oldfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Martin is absent. Commissioner True?
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Ghost is absent. The motion carries.
Excuse me. Future agenda items and other planning related events. You kind of went over future agenda items, but is there anything else anyone would like to announce in this?
I have one small thing. I would just like to share that I don't know if folks know Will Travis, but Trav was a head of BCDC for many years, and also got to know him on the working to get the North Berkeley BART as a project over the last several years, and he passed away last week. So just wanted to share that news, since some of you may have known him, and he was, I just got to know him through that North Berkeley BART visioning process and advocacy, and his vision, I hope, has really made it into the project, and I hope the work to bring housing to that site really honors his efforts.
Great, thanks. I wasn't aware of that. I hadn't heard that. Thank you. Okay, any other announcements? Okay. Okay, item 10. Let's get into the main agenda items. Item 10 is our sole kind of main agenda item here with new info. And I would just remind everyone, this is a discussion. We're not taking any action on this tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sam.
Sorry, I was just gonna, I didn't know if Justin wanted to introduce, but you wanna
No.
turn it over to Eleanor?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Yes, this is, as you read in your agenda, this is an item about some items that keep innovation in Berkeley referral. The Office of Economic Development is going to give a background on the referral, some background on the sort of sector of the economy that we're talking about with some of these changes, and then initiate a discussion on some zoning changes. So I'll turn it over to Eleanor Hollander, the Director of the Office of Economic Development.
Thank you, Justin. Good evening, commissioners, members of the public, staff. Did I get everybody? Planning Commission, Substitute Commissioner Allen, good to see you. I'm Eleanor Hollander. I'm the manager of the Office of Economic Development at the City of Berkeley. We're in the city manager's office. I'm here tonight with my colleague Liz Redmond-Cleveland. I think I was last before you all in October of last year when we were talking about zoning amendments for Berkeley business. I'm here to bring some good news about that. It has since been adopted by council and been implemented, and has since gone on to win an award of excellence from the Northern California chapter of the American Planning Association in the category of economic planning and development. It's a huge honor to get an award of excellence. It means we're actually eligible for the state awards, which is really exciting. And so, I don't know, maybe next time I see you all again, I'll bring some more good news. Fingers crossed, I'm sure I've jinxed it now.
That's really great, thank you, because we actually rarely hear back about kind of the impacts on return on things that we spend a lot of time talking through, so that's really great. Congratulations, you all did a lot of great work.
Yeah. And congratulations to the Planning Commission. You all passed unanimously, it was adopted unanimously at council, and it was really an honor to see it get implemented and then to see it be recognized. So thanks for that. Tonight, I'm back to talk on a slightly different topic, slightly different subject area, but equally important to nurturing our diverse local economy here in Berkeley, the innovation sector. You might be asking yourself, what is the innovation sector? Don't worry, we're going to get into that quite a bit, and we're going to go into detail on responding to the City Council referral from 2022 on entitled Keep Innovation in Berkeley. So just a little bit of background. In March of 2020, I'll never forget, I was sitting in a half-empty council chamber back when real life was, before COVID, and a referral was adopted by council to update the definition of research and development in our zoning code. In March of 2022, thanks to the good hard work of this commission and many others, the updated definition of research and development, or R&D as it's abbreviated here, was adopted into the zoning code. In September of 2022, former Councilmember Robinson, who represents District 7, which is adjacent to campus, our mayor, who represents all of Berkeley, former Councilmember Kate Harrison of the downtown District 4, and the West Berkeley District 2, represented by Councilmember Taplin, adopted and put forth this referral called Keep Innovation in Berkeley. It was ranked out of the re-weighted range voting, that's what RRD stands for, number 12 overall, and number 1 for the planning department outside of housing issues. In spring of 2024, we've done some research, which we'll go into in a bit, and then here we are tonight in May 1st of 2024 for a discussion on staff's response to the Keep Innovation in Berkeley referral. OED, the Office of Economic Development, that's our abbreviation, has consulted more than 75 stakeholders on this topic through policy-specific research session, outreach. We have discussed with, I don't know if you guys can read this whole list here. You have it in your packet there. It's up on the screen there. The Berkeley Business District Network, the Berkeley Startup Cluster Advisors, real estate brokers, regulatory agencies, including our own fire department, and our own toxics division, which is a division of the Planning and Development Department. We've also, again, here's a picture of Liz presenting at the Berkeley Startup Cluster meeting in March. This is a snapshot of the Berkeley economy on the right-hand side. Just after this Berkeley Startup Cluster is a partnership of the University of California at Berkeley, the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and various incubators in town like the Berkeley Startup, Berkeley Skydeck, thank you. What I wanted to mention about this is it's been really exciting to have a lot of partnerships with many institutions in our city, especially the incoming Chancellor Rich Lyons was the speaker just before Liz at this very event. So we are seeing quite a bit of nurturing of the innovation economy in our city, and so this is a very exciting time to be tackling this topic. We also consulted with our neighbors, Emeryville, San Leandro, Alameda, slightly further afield, Redwood City and San Diego, and we completed research on cities that other university town cities such as Cambridge, Massachusetts, just to make sure that we had a sense of what our municipal neighbors are doing with respect to this topic. Again, we're going to go into detail at each of these, but the overview of the referral recommendations from September of 2022 are these four that are listed in front of you. So now they're detailed in your packet that you have and in the report. And now we're going to go over the recommendations for referrals. But before that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Liz, who's going to give us a bit of an overview and a grounding in what is the innovation sector.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Liz Redmond Cleveland, the Chief Strategist of Sustainable Growth, and I work very closely with Ellen on our team. It's been a while since I've been here, so a pleasure to be here tonight. We wanted to zoom out a little bit and give you an economic snapshot of what's happening in the Berkeley economy and the role that the innovation companies, or those companies that do research and development or R&D here in Berkeley, play in it. You're seeing on the screen or in your packet our top 25 employers. Those are listed alphabetically, and those are top 25 in terms of the number of people that they employ in Berkeley. And you'll notice they represent quite a diverse number of industry sectors. In fact, a fifth of them are in the public sector, including UC Berkeley and the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, which are obviously the major drivers of our local innovation ecosystem. The two biggest subgroups are, again, including UC Berkeley, education and healthcare. And then we're really excited that just last year, for the first time, 2 startups or companies that are doing R&D in our city actually made it onto the top 25 list. Those were 12, which is a carbon transformation company, which is splitting apart carbon dioxide, taking it out of the atmosphere, and turning it into syngas, which can then go into other products which require petroleum-based products normally. So they are producing sustainable aviation fuels, plastics, and other things that rely on petroleum by taking the carbon out of the atmosphere. And even more exciting, just in the last month or so, they signed a big agreement with the International Airlines Group to supply 8 European airlines with their sustainable aviation fuel. So it's exciting that they're headquartered here in Berkeley and continuing to raise money. Even just got a research and development grant from the federal government, from the Department of Energy, I think it was like a week ago. The other really exciting one, Upside Foods, first in the nation to be granted the Food and Drug Administration or FDA approval for their cultivated meat products. So watch this space. Other key facts and figures that you might want to be aware of as you think about the innovation sector and its role in our overall economy is that Berkeley unemployment rates have continued to rise post-pandemic. We're now at 4.1% as of a couple months ago. This is tracking with what we're seeing at the county and state level, though we are slightly below both of those. We're also seeing citywide ground floor commercial vacancy rate higher than what it was pre-pandemic, though it's largely stabilized at around 8% and slightly lower by the end of 2023 than it was in 2022. Office vacancy, you've probably heard the story elsewhere, and here, yes, it's rising. Companies and organizations have transitioned, I think at this point, kind of permanently to either hybrid or remote models. So that rate is now at a higher number than we've seen before, at 13.4%. And then our lab vacancy rate is also at a higher number than we've ever seen, at around 37.4% by one real estate brokerage's a report that just came out a few weeks ago. And that number, while it's extremely high and may sound kind of scary, is in part because of the 540,000 square feet Berkeley Commons property down there that you see off the I-80 highway and on the aquatic park that still hasn't even gotten all of its PG&E electricity hookups, but doesn't have any signed deals for tenants. And so when that hit our number, and the number went up. So hopefully that won't last. They'll get all hooked up, and we hope to have a great high-quality tenant moving in soon. Now let's talk specifically about the innovation economy and how that relates to the discussion tonight. We have approximately 400 what we refer to as innovation sector companies spanning our entire city. The largest concentrations of those are in West Berkeley, so that's west of San Pablo Avenue, where you're seeing those big blue dots, which are life science companies, and purple dots, which are hardware companies. And then close to the UC Berkeley campus, those are all the big red dots. Those are software companies. And just recently we added that big blue dot south of campus in the old Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive space. That's what's known as the Bakar Bioingenuity Hub, and it houses the Baker Labs Accelerator Program, which works with life science companies and has 35 companies in there today. So those companies you can delve into and see what they do if you're curious at the berkeleystartupcluster.com website, startups page. We track that and try to keep that as up to date as anyone can when it's a startup, because they come and go daily. The vast majority of what I just referred to as innovation companies are startups. Those are early stage companies that are still trying to figure out how they can make a replicable, scalable product that they can sell to a customer and become profitable. A lot of those are doing research and development to figure out what their product is, to figure out their business plan, and determine where they go from here. The other ones we mentioned, there could be accelerators. There's large R&D organizations like Meyer Sound or Bayer Pharmaceutical, right? They're also doing R&D in our city, but I wouldn't call those by any means a startup. So that's the innovation sector broadly. When we talk about the number of startups, you can see that it's that 81% shown is about 325 startups, and that's dramatically higher than it was about a decade ago. And I think that's in large part because of the huge investment that our campus has made in what they call I&E, innovation and entrepreneurship. There are a lot of programs happening to support the people that develop the technology to actually grow those companies into something that's profitable, that can create jobs here in Berkeley. In fact, just last year, UC Berkeley was ranked #1 worldwide for producing venture-backed startups. That's a huge accomplishment. As you might guess, Stanford, MIT, those are close behind. Now, it's really important to think about these companies because they're not just creating economic opportunity here in Berkeley. They're actually designing solutions to some of the world's biggest environmental and social challenges, whether that be climate change, aging populations, new materials that we need. Our largest concentration of these companies is the green slice of the pie. That's biotech, life sciences, healthcare. Those are people solving human health conditions and coming up with solutions that make it easier for us to live longer and healthier lives. The second largest slice are the software companies. And what's been also interesting in recent years is the growing slices, that's the gray, that's clean technology or climate technology, and hardware. Now, I also want to mention, while I said that these startups are sometimes small and early stage, they have an outsized impact on our ability here in Berkeley to actually create wealth for the community and draw capital in. In fact, last year was a really tough fundraising environment worldwide, but 84 companies in Berkeley raised money. Of that, $840 million came from seed and venture capital, and $17 million came from government research and development grants awarded to Berkeley companies. Those are things that came from the California Energy Commission, from the Department of Defense, from the National Science Foundation, from the National Institute of Health to support R&D at companies here in Berkeley. So that leads us to our first recommendation that you'll see in the staff report. That is to permit R&D with a zoning certificate, ZC, in our major commercial corridors. This would be for uses under 20,000 square feet, and it would affect the following zoning districts. The CDMU, that's our downtown, the CT, and the CC, which are, that is south of campus, along the Telegraph Avenue area. The CW, the West Berkeley Commercial Corridor, that's from north to south.
Do you need a laser?
If you want to live.
It's okay, you guys have it. I
Yeah.
think you, hopefully
Thank you for your
everyone knows about-
innovation,
Yeah, no, it's perfect.
but we're gonna be old school. They're indicated in green.
Yeah, if you have any questions too after, we can come back to this slide. But there, so, and then the last thing I want to mention in terms of locations in the city, there's also that connective tissue between that West Berkeley hub and that downtown hub that I showed you on the map earlier, and that's our University Avenue corridor. I wanted to turn to a couple of examples to just get your head around when we say R&D and that it might be permitted with a zoning certificate, what would that actually look like in real life? So I want to start with a company, TDK. They were formerly called Chirp Microsystems. There were a group of founders that got a grant from DARPA, the defense agency, to figure out how they could use their ultrasound technology to have a sensor that could operate under a number of different lighting conditions. They got that grant. They then went through the startup accelerator at Skydeck. And when they grew out of there, they found a sublease in Berkeley. But ultimately, they realized in order to scale and do their R&D, they would have to move to West Berkeley. So they found an office in West Berkeley, which I had the privilege of touring just a couple weeks ago with a number of Berkeley high school students as part of our STEM Career X program, where high school students get to learn how their STEM skills apply in the workplace. And one of the co-founders, Richie, he was sharing with the students how they print their sensors, which are about this big, using 3D printers. The parts are shown in the picture here. And he really wants to maintain their connection with campus. He recalled that back in the early days, they liked being, using the clean rooms that were accessible to them on the UC Berkeley campus, and they still pay tribute to that in their very office. You can see that they painted a picture of UC Berkeley, and that campanile is actually poking through behind him because they have a whole wall of their office looking like UC Berkeley is just in their backyard. Another example, and I should just also mention, today where their sensors are being used, because some of you may be using them, are in your robot vacuum cleaners, they're on your laptops, they're in a number, they were doing contact tracing, and they're in a number of other smart devices that are found in the home. Another great example of a company that asked not to be named, but spun out of Berkeley's mechanical engineering department. In fact, the professor who's the founder and CEO is one of the lead professors in the Berkeley ME department. And they're also using 3D printers. In this case, they're using them to make sensors that can get paired with a drone to assess risk in a hazmat situation, like a wildfire or a toxic chemical spill, before a human first responder goes in and risks their life on the scene. They too went through the Berkeley Skydeck Startup Accelerator in downtown Berkeley, but realized to do their R&D, they had to move to West Berkeley. That was challenging for them because the professor is still a professor at Cal, so she's splitting her time and having to take 1 or 2 buses in between, as well as the many interns and students that are doing their capstone projects that work with this company. But they currently are happy overall being accommodated in their light use lab space, which is essentially a West Berkeley office, though they still have to sometimes have meetings on the campus in the professor's office, because that's easier for the staff and students to access. I think this last quote here sums it up nicely. This comes from Cynthia Cole, who used to be the chief economist and assistant planning director for the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, and ABAG, Association of Bay Area Governments. She was also a lead director and economist at UC Berkeley's Fisher Center for Real Estate and Urban Economics. And she said, manufacturing is thought of as different from office, but many are using offices to make things, which we know is part of our definition of research and development. It may be that new approaches to zoning are needed.
Thanks, Liz. Speaking of zoning, back to the recommendations from the Keep Innovation in Berkeley referral. The second one is to explicitly encourage research and development in M prefix zones, and mixed manufacturing is MM, and mixed use light industrial. These are currently where research and development is permitted. I'm sure you all are really familiar with our zoning code and how the district purposes at the beginning of each of the chapters set forth what kind of uses can be in the space and what is the purpose of this zoning district. Our colleagues at some of the companies Liz was talking about may be well versed in mechanical engineering, but they are not as conversant in land use code. And so when they are looking for office space or seeking to expand, or going from being 2 kids in a dorm room with an idea to trying to hire 5 people and generate something, they are looking quickly to find a space. And if they do not see research and development sort of set forth in the purposes section of the zoning code, it doesn't feel like those uses are embraced, and they move on, and it leaves Berkeley at a competitive disadvantage. So the recommendation is to change some of the language. It's in your packet as attachment 1 to add research and development to the district purpose sections in MM and MULI. The third is to revise the parking requirements for R&D uses. Since this referral was passed, state law has changed quite a bit on the topic of requiring parking, especially minimums, and within a half a mile of a high transit corridor. Most of the areas we're talking about tonight indeed are already on high transit corridors, such as the 722 bus on San Pablo Avenue, or the buses that ply Telegraph Avenue on the way to campus. However, for the areas that need to, might just be outside of that half a mile radius, we are suggesting a 1 per 1,000 ratio per person. And then I'm going to turn it to you, Liz, to talk about the fourth item in the referral.
So if everybody's still awake, I could put you to sleep right now, talking about biosafety level class organisms. But here, let's make this a little easier. If you don't mind passing this out. Biosafety levels are defined at the federal level by the Centers for Disease Control and National Institute for Health. What they do is govern the design and construction of facilities where R&D operates, where labs are, and the required on-site safety equipment and practices. They range in risk level from 1 to 4, where 1 is the lowest risk. And the health and safety of what labs and research and development facilities do are regulated very heavily, and I believe you're also getting another packet which shows you all of the regulations. But those are what R&D companies need to do to comply, to make sure that they're supporting environmental regulations and keeping our community safe. In fact, of those regulatory agencies, the City of Berkeley's Toxics Department is the main one that they work with, what's called a CUPA. Our fire department also goes in and inspects, so they get these inspections on a regular basis. They put together hazardous materials business plans and a range of different written documents that explain how they're going to operate in a safe and clean way for our environment. What we found is that most cities that we looked at, that are our neighboring cities, do not regulate biosafety level activities through their zoning codes. These are managed through the regulatory agencies. In most cases, they don't. In the few cases where they do mention biosafety level activities, we are more restrictive than most other Bay Area jurisdictions. And when I say we are more restrictive, what I'm referring to is that text that you're seeing in the bottom, which appears in our mixed-use light industrial district zoning about laboratories, where it says commercial, physical, or biological laboratories using Class 3 organisms are not permitted in the Millie district. Use of Class 2 organisms are permitted only in locations at least 500 feet from a residential district or an MUR district. So upon looking at how we compare to our peers, and we don't want to be at a competitive disadvantage when a company is thinking about where it would be easier for them to locate and it would be a sure thing that they can do their work safely, time and clarity are of the essence for companies that are on a short runway because they have venture capital that they're burning through. If they can't prove their product, they fold. You know the startup story, right? Here today, gone tomorrow. So we propose either that we strike the use of Class 2 organisms are permitted only in locations at least 500 feet from a residential district or MUR district, because this doesn't seem to be similar to anything we've seen anywhere else and is managed by the regulatory agencies. Or maybe even better yet would be to just take out the reference to these organisms in our zoning code and let the toxics department and fire department and Bay Area Air Quality Management District and all those other agencies that you're seeing on this handout do their job correctly. And lest you feel any fear still about these BSL level activities that are happening in our community, we will mention that there are many BSL 2-level labs on the USC Berkeley campus. They are within 500 feet of residential districts. They're even in the same buildings where students and professors are spending their entire day. Same thing is happening at UCSF and at universities across America. And again, there's an extensive environmental health and safety regulatory environment here in California that manages these things. One final example for you before we turn to discussion. This is a company, Valitor Bio, that we've come to know quite well over the last several years because the founder and CEO, Wes Jackson, is a Berkeley Startup Cluster advisor. And he's been working with us to understand the importance of improving our zoning code. But they're developing new vaccines for vision-threatening diseases such as age-related macular degeneration, where the current treatment requires getting frequent injection into the back of your eye. If their technology is approved, it would reduce the frequency of administration to 1 or 2 times per year. So this founder and chief scientific officer actually lives in Albany, but has spent more than a decade working in Berkeley. And when he went to expand his space, he found that there was a nearby site in the old JFK University, a vacant building that's owned by Meyer Sound down there by the Orchard Supply Hardware on Ashby and San Pablo. And he was really excited that he could just move a couple blocks, keep his staff in their same commute patterns, stay in Berkeley and move in. But when he presented the option to his board and investors, he shared with them the fears because he saw this information about the 500 feet distance requirement and was like, we're not even sure that we're going to be able to locate here because I think depending on where you measure the opening door of our office from to the MUR district, we might be within 500 feet of a mixed-use residential district. And this kind of uncertainty that he had in this process is reflective of what we've heard from many other entrepreneurs when they see this in our zoning code. So again, we don't want Berkeley to be at a competitive disadvantage. We want our zoning codes to be as clear as possible and to distinguish between the regulatory work and what we need to do for land use permissions. And so with that, we're going to turn it over to your comments, your questions. Eleanor and I are both here tonight to answer any questions you have. And in general, those are our extensions, and we would be happy to take your time now, and we'll turn it to Justin to facilitate the discussion.
Yeah, that was a lot for everybody to take in, but maybe the next slide can show what we really hope to get your feelings on. As you'll see, attachment 1 included actual amendments to the zoning ordinance that covered the first 3 of the 4 discussion topics today regarding the permit levels, the revision of the purpose sections, and the parking requirements. And we'd like to hear your thoughts and feelings on that to provide us direction to come back to you with zoning ordinance amendments for a public hearing. And then also the next slide, if you had any questions, direction that you wanted to share regarding the BSL language that we discussed as well. And I'll turn it over the chair to you.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much. Really well done. I appreciate the presentation. So we'll do this the way we normally do this, which is first we'll do any clarifying kind of technical questions from commissioners to staff on what they heard. We'll do those, then we'll open it up for public comment. We'll get comments from the public, so if anyone wishes to speak on that item, you can at that time. And we typically do 2 minutes for individuals, 3 minutes if you're representing an organization, and please state the organization when you do that. Then we'll close that part of it, and then we'll come back here, and that's when we'll have a discussion amongst the commissioners giving feedback to staff. And so I would remind you that this isn't an action item, it's really giving them feedback, because presumably this will come back to us at some point in the hopefully not too distant future. And I think what I'll do on that too is what we normally do with items like this is just kind of go down the row and give comments to staff, and I would encourage you to, you know, stay close to the questions that they're asking specifically about this, but of course you can comment or, you know, flag questions related to any of it. Anyway, that's the general sort of order of what we'll do. So why don't we do the first part of that? And are there any technical kind of clarifying questions that commissioners have with regard to the material? So we'll start here and then we'll go.
Sure. On the first one, what's the current requirement for R&D?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because I failed to tell you that. So it's currently allowed in our MM and MULI with a zoning certificate under 20,000 square feet. And it's allowed with an administrative use permit in most of the downtown, Telegraph, other districts that we mentioned that are on that's the proposal. Let me pull up the exact ones. But yeah, it's an AUP in the CT, CC, and CDMU. And then, let's see, we allow R&D uses with an AUP with additional findings in this. Am I saying
In all the
that?
C districts.
Is that answered?
Yeah. And then for item number 3, what's the current requirement for parking?
On parking, yeah. Yeah, what is the current? Is
2
that
spaces
your-
per 1,000 square feet.
2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Okay, is that good, Commissioner?
Yep.
I like those laser questions.
How did staff come up with 20,000 square feet or less for a zoning certificate in districts that are not the M districts or C districts? Why is 20,000 the right number there?
It's the threshold that's permitted in district where it's already permitted.
Yeah, I was just kidding.
Period.
Then, so looking at the university and the San Pablo commercial districts, those both have nodes that have commercial requirements at the nodes. Do you have thoughts about R&D in the nodes or not in the nodes, or do you have a preference there?
Well, I can speak from the experience looking at the nodes related to the zoning for Berkeley business example. Most of the changes to the zoning for Berkeley business regularized. So if you were in the node or out of the node, you had the same requirements. And so the thinking follows in this case, and it would be the same requirements whether you're in the node or out of the node.
And then my last question is for office uses in the CT and the CDMU, there's a transparency requirement that's either like your business, you have like 10 feet through, or there's something happening there that includes active ground uses for pedestrian experience. Do you have thoughts or concerns for incorporating transparency for these offices? I mean, they are very similar to these business R&D, which is often similar to office.
Thank you for that question. That is a great point to bring up about window transparency. Sometimes when we're talking in a business context, transparency is about your bookkeeping.
Yes.
So I just want to clarify this is about having your windows adjacent to a store, a street frontage, be indeed transparency to look through them. Transparency, I think you're talking about the section of the code that talks about office uses. I don't know, it's in the use-specific permit requirements section. We talked a bit about transparency in actually the Berkeley business zoning piece. There is a transparency for requirement for downtown uses for gyms, for example, or group instruction. And we found that many businesses and industry folks actually did not care for the transparency requirement, trying to teach a yoga class or a bar class or some kind of group instruction, whether it's a piano or a sewing class, is actually quite distracting to have your clients maybe not the position they'd like to be exposed to the street ballet out front on the sidewalk to, and they actually found that kind of a challenge for their business and operations. So thoughts about that when it relates to research and development are along similar lines. I don't know if you wanted to add something else to that.
Sure, I would say we did not specifically poll any of our 75 plus stakeholders on this topic, but having visited many R&D companies and startups over the last 7 years in this job, I would say a lot of them are generally sensitive that they are doing proprietary work, they are doing research and development, and thus something that's never been done before, and they don't want someone else to steal that before they come up with the idea. So I think at a high level, putting it out there in our zoning code that they must have a window may be sending a message that we don't fully understand what they're doing. That being said, I think that businesses probably could work with it because, you know, their cafeteria or their entrance hall that has their logo on it, they might be excited about that. So I can't say for sure. I would just say it doesn't feel like something that's ever come up as a pro, like a thing that the industry would be supportive of. I might be a little bit scary to them, but I'm not sure it'd be a showstopper.
What page was that on? Actually, missed that. Do you know?
What, that was it's in the zoning ordinance, it's not included.
Oh, it's not in the staff report.
It's-
We were not recommending that as staff.
Because I didn't remember
It
seeing
wasn't
that.
referenced in the referral from the
Okay.
council either.
Right.
I just wanted to add a little bit more clarification on the node question in the CW. In the CW, as you likely remember, the ground floor uses that are permitted in the nodes are limited to certain types of uses, and we've recommended no changes to that list of uses. That list of uses does not include research and development at this time. In the CU district, it's more about different development standards and not as many use restrictions in the nodes.
Commissioner Allen, are you? You're
I'm
good?
done, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Tu.
Follow up, what about uses over 20,000 square feet? Are they allowed at all or only with the UP?
The proposal in the packet is for AUP, which is, as you all know, I'm sure, but I feel like I must say it, is a discretionary permit. It goes to ZAB, and it can be appealed to ZAB and ultimately the city council, and you get a yellow poster and you sort of force the discussion to get to solutions with your neighboring people that have seen the poster
Right.
and wish to.
But that's
talk
no
about it.
change from the current situation, right?
Which districts are you speaking of?
The C districts.
Well, right now, they're required to go through the administrative use process, which will take 6 months and require discretion of staff and the zoning
Right, and
adjustments
then-
board. But in this recommendation, there would be a change in, but you're saying for above 20,000.
Right.
Right, that would be still the
So,
same.
so those are already allowed.
Well, I think, Justin, can you, for some of them, I think above 20,000 actually goes to use permit. Is that not true?
Currently, I mean, the use in the C districts is research and development. It's with the AUP with findings, with no size threshold
Okay.
noted. So it would be largely no change. I think the change would be that currently they would be permitted with an AUP, but you need to make specific findings. This would just be with an AUP without those additional findings. Although the additional findings are very much similar to the findings you make for an AUP anyway. So I'd say effectively no difference.
Good, okay. Thank you for that. And just so everyone knows, ZC zoning certificate, AUP administrative use permit, and then UP is use permit, which is also sometimes called use permit public hearing. Okay, any more clarifying questions? None? Okay, let's.
Question, did you consider the North Shattuck corridor, and why did you decide not to include it?
That's actually a great question. We would like to bring up a couple of the other issues that were raised in our stakeholder feedback to date, just so you can be aware. One was to include North Shattuck in this. This was not in the council members' referral, but we have heard from several stakeholders that there would be interest from property owners and businesses that want to be close to campus. We've heard them say, well, Marszalek is just as close to campus as, say, Telegraph. So that is definitely something for us to consider tonight. And then we have, I don't know if we want to talk about it now because that doesn't answer your question. We can talk about it after. But we did hear a couple other things that are not in the staff report at this time.
I guess the clarifying question is, were there positive reasons to not include it? You know, reasons why it would not be good, or was it just not referred and that therefore not considered?
It wasn't referred, but we're reflecting from the stakeholder outreach that came up.
Got it, okay.
Sorry, it's indicated in light green up there.
Okay.
And one other question, I understand the need for clarity, but is there a threshold for building things that qualifies something as R&D? I mean, it's so much like office. Is there a sort of a technical definition of, you know, how many things you actually have to make, or how much of the floor space is devoted to 3D printers or whatever that would tip it over? Is it able to be judged that way, or is it really just more about providing certainty for the businesses by explicitly allowing it and inviting it?
That would be in the R&D definition, right?
Yeah, I can, so let me read to you the
I guess
R&D definition.
what I'm getting at is, what would stop, is there anything that sort of stops someone now from just having an office where things can get built? Is there?
Well, I can answer, okay, I would defer to my colleagues in planning and how to, but we've had many businesses be told by the real estate brokers that if you're doing R&D, that's not permitted with an over-the-counter or zoning certificate, so it's gonna take you 5 or 6 months, so you should look elsewhere, like Emeryville, because they'll do it quicker. So that would prevent you as a business owner who's watching the clock and your money run down. We've had many businesses come to us and say, we don't see R&D at all, like permitted in these zoning districts. So those are the types of things that would prevent a business owner from trying to. We have been told when interacting with our land use planning staff, if they were to go in and say they were using an office space, they probably would be permitted. But if they were to say, we're doing R&D or we need to have a lab, then we would not. Do you want to add anything to that, Justin?
Yes, I mean, there is a definition of research and development in the glossary that is distinct from just regular office in many ways. I think the main thing is that there is a sort of over mixture of a number of different uses, and there you could have a lab, some warehousing, some light manufacturing, the sort of co-location of a number of different almost classifications of uses in one place. If you did just simply have computers on desks, you probably are not an R&D place because you really only have one function, you know, just the computer part. So yeah, I mean, I think it is, we are in a little bit of a situation where we have definitions and innovation and things that are sometimes a little bit complicated, but I think the research and development definition is fairly clear in the glossary.
Sorry, one other thing I wanted to add just is that sometimes it's confusing for people and like lay people or scientists or founders because there's the definition in our code and it's how they think of their business, right? So they might say, I'm doing R&D. They could potentially be doing that all at a computer on a desk. We would say, no, you're just the office.
Right.
But that is just to get your head around.
Right, and Planning Commission did review and provide recommendation on that revision of the definition not too terribly long ago, but that was a big part of the discussion was what do those words mean to us, as well as, you know, how does that relate to what's actually happening? And what, you know, things are happening, changing really quickly in terms of what people make and do and technology, that it's very difficult to write language that's clear across the board. But Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, appreciate that. First, let me say great work, staff. This was really in-depth and eye-opening. I just have a few questions that I just want to grab a little clarity on. When we're saying we're competing with like an Emeryville, what language besides the code that we're, or the language that we're changing is instrumental into bringing in these new businesses? We're talking about being competitive here. What other municipalities besides, say, Emeryville are we looking at here?
Sure, yeah, and I don't have them all memorized. I know they're in our staff report, but We've actually looked at probably 20 plus other Bay Area jurisdictions. So definitely on the biosafety level language, we compared very closely. I know San Leandro, Hayward, Emeryville, Oakland, a lot of those allow research and development in a number of their zones with a zoning certificate or their equivalent of that type of use permit. I don't know, does that answer your question?
I thought you were asking a question.
No, okay.
Okay, with that, why don't we take public comment at this time? Would anyone like to speak on this item? If you do, we have a microphone here, which I assume is turned on. Oh, okay, you may have to turn it on. And we do have a clock, we do 2 minutes for individuals and 3 minutes for
You can take it out.
So thank you all.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners, staff. My name is Zelda Bronstein. I'm a journalist who writes about land use planning and politics. From 1997 to 2004, I sat on the Berkeley Planning Commission. And our top priority when I got on the commission was implementing the West Berkeley plan. A key thrust of that plan is still embedded, but I would say precariously, in the purposes of the mixed light industrial or Muley district. And I read, and this is in your packet actually on page 28. Encourage the development of an area where light manufacturers can operate free from the economic, physical, and social constraints caused by incompatible uses. And encourage the creation and continuation of well-paid jobs which do not require advanced degrees. Achieving those purposes required limiting, and still requires, limiting uses that can pay higher rents than light industrial and artisanal businesses, specifically office, lab, and research facilities. Item 10, keep innovation in Berkeley, would erode protections for light industry and artisans by encouraging R&D in the Muley. The staff report identifies the measured target market, quote, the labor pool of university students, professors, and others who spend a portion of the work week at UC Berkeley and LB&L. These are people with advanced, some very advanced degrees. Not against advanced degrees, I have a couple myself. But this isn't about me, this is about the kind of city we want Berkeley to be. The authors of this measure all say they're progressives who want to eliminate exclusionary zoning, by which they mean zoning that keeps people of modest means out of nice neighborhoods. But zoning can also exclude people with limited education from opportunities to earn a decent living. By encouraging more R&D in the Muley, that's exactly what this measure will do. I call it exclusionary.
Thank you. Amazing time.
My name is Bernard Marszalek. I've been a resident in Berkeley for 40 years.
A little louder.
A little louder.
My name is Bernard Marszalek. I've been a resident in Berkeley for 40 years. I have a brief comment about West Berkeley, but first a little acknowledgement about the stolen lands acknowledgement that you've all read. You know, something about stolen lands. They got broken up into rancheros, then farmlands, then into tiny little pieces of parcels that we buy and trade to the highest bidder. Part of the culture of the Ohlone and the other native peoples was that the land was a common resource. We've trashed that, we've erased that from history. Unless that's included in any acknowledgement, it's basically just virtue signaling. Now about West Berkeley. I've been involved in co-op development for over 30 years. I worked at Inkworks Press, which was a 7th Street Berkeley industrial print shop, commercial print shop. I gave a tour recently, last month, to some people from Pittsburgh who are co-op developers. First place I went to with them was Adams and Chittering Scientific Glass. They've been a business in West Berkeley for 20 years, 30 years. The last 6 years as a co-op, the owners sold the business to the workers there. About 12 of them are working in a building doing scientific glass, which is actually needed for the labs that you're talking about. But they're in Berkeley, in a building they don't own. The landlord could easily just take them and throw them out if he got a bid for land, for his land that was beyond what they could pay. They're very aware of this. You'll lose businesses like this in Berkeley who've given 30 years of their investments to Berkeley. It seems sad to trash them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly Hammergren, and before you start the clock, can you add the presentation to the website so we can look at it when we get home?
It'll go up tomorrow.
Okay. All right. So I have a couple of thoughts on this. One, on the map. Those are the same areas where where the city's developers are tearing down the commercial buildings and building housing. So really our commercial buildings on those main thoroughfares are disappearing and becoming housing instead. So you might think about that in terms of how you're going to put your zoning together, and think about the San Pablo plan, which is really housing for all of San Pablo. The other thing, I was a little concerned about taking out the language of level 2 on the biologicals. I guess that comes from living through the pandemic and spending my first couple of months reading about pandemics. I knocked off 11 books in that period in just 1 month or so. And one of them was The Deadliest Enemy, which was on biologicals, where I really learned about level 4. So I'm concerned that how do we know that we will not have slippage from one level to another in terms of this innovation biological research? I mean, how much supervision will there be or investigation to make sure we don't have slippage? And I know here that the goal is for businesses to have people that are going to work on site and not work from home, and Berkeley's going to pursue the businesses that seem to bring the greatest amount of money, but I also share the concern about what is going to happen to our crafts people and our artisans in the community, since that is a sort of a battle between the development of R&D and the artists who have been here. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening. My name is Betsy Morris. I fell in love with West Berkeley when I first moved to it, and I am a retired, semi-retired economic development planner. I want to speak to several points. One, my first job was a study of San Joaquin County, which had great enthusiasm that they were going to become the next Silicon Valley, since they were the next county over. So I actually wrote this with, co-authored it with Cynthia Kroll, fine woman, fine researcher. And the upshot of our analysis was, you know what? Find your own employers, find the people who are innovating and growing and have a company in your county, which turned out to be cheese, agricultural, refining, value-added products, and waterbeds. Turned out there was a local innovator. So they were not going to, and they have not grown because of the chip explosion in Silicon Valley. And as we know, Silicon Valley doesn't even have chip manufacturers. So one lesson is build on what you already have. I am only interested in the West Berkeley Muley and MM. Up near campus, that's campus territory, that's great. But West Berkeley is a place where dirty things can happen, and some of the most innovative things have happened there. And I would ask, one, who's already got the jobs? And let's make sure we can accommodate them. I am extremely wary of looking at the latest trends in real estate development, which is kind of what's happening and driving a number of projects that are R&D or life science campuses. Show me the employers and show me that they are going to actually commit. This is the difference between a bear committing to, receiving benefits and returning benefits to the community. So I have more to say, but I hope and support your work, but I ask you to hold off on West Berkeley until you have more detailed information to share with us. Thanks.
Thank you, and I would remind you, I mean, this is a work in progress. So
Yes.
you're absolutely more than welcome to submit comments to staff, to the commission. Yeah, okay.
I know. Thank you.
As you know.
Thank you. As I should know further in it, I mean, my bad.
Because
We'll get it in
3
writing.
minutes is not that long.
Thank you so much for letting me share.
Yeah. Please.
Hello, thank you. My name is Christy Shirilla. I'm with Biocom California, which is a trade association for the life sciences. We have about 700 members in the Bay Area, and a good portion of that is here in Berkeley. We actually had the chance to work pretty closely with the OED teams to talk with our members about getting some of this information that they were looking for. So I know this is like a very well thought out, very well researched plan. A lot of time and effort went into it. And I just want to say, I had some prepared remarks, but I think what I'd like to say instead is, you sort of touched on it, but for our member companies, predictability is very important. If something is unpredictable, it means it costs a lot of money. And a lot of our startup companies are, 2 people with a credit card. So they're still at the very kind of friends and family stage of funding. So that certainty is really important. And I think this provides that, the way that it's written. And the other thing I just wanted to let you know, we've done a lot of work on BSL in the Bay Area. So if y'all have any questions, we're here to talk to you about it. And I think that's all I have to say. So thanks so much.
Great, thank you.
Biosafety.
Hi, my name is Nikhil Badla. I'm currently a researcher at UC Berkeley, looking to move off campus. I submitted a written comment to the email, but I am a big supporter of the work that OED is proposing here and the changes to the zoning code. I've been looking for a space to house my business for almost 2 years, starting in 2022. I recently got very close to a lease with a couple landlords, but the AUP requirement and the uncertainty of 6 months of not knowing whether or not I'd be able to use the space and the lease contingency was a deal breaker for both of them. The other thing I would like to say that hasn't been discussed is laboratory use. So that's another definition in the glossary, another use separate from research and development. This has also been very confusing when trying to start my business and find a location, because I do biological research, but that's mentioned in both categories. Research and development is allowed by AUP in the commercial zones, but biological laboratory is only allowed in DMU, CU, and CC, not CT, where there is space available that I was looking at. And again, that landlord also doesn't want to wait 6 months for a lease that may or may not come through. So I think it would, maybe an extension of the work currently occurring would be to clarify and separate these two uses. And, I don't know what the spirit of either of these uses was when the language was first crafted, but it seems to me that research and development is a very large use that could very much subsume laboratory, so I'm not sure what laboratory is supposed to mean. I can say that I live in Oakland, so I'm also looking at Oakland. Today, after 6 days, they've already approved my use as a research service in downtown Montclair. Okay, so I'm very excited, but I do want to be close to campus. So these are, in terms of competition, which has been discussed, this is a clear case where Berkeley is losing.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the public? Okay, so let's turn it back to commission. I think what we'll do, maybe we'll start down on this end, if you don't mind, Commissioner Moore, and do kind of comments, guidance to staff on these.
Sure.
And we'll just go down the row, and if then people want to chime in, afterwards, that's great too.
Sounds good to me. I do understand the need to be competitive within the marketplace and being able to, for lack of a better word, lure prospective companies into Berkeley. At the same time, I want to make sure that the language that we're adopting is in line with other municipalities and that our safety concerns which I know that you guys have went into great detail to do some explaining about some of the lab levels and what that actually entails. But I think that there would, from my understanding, to have a little more background information on that and what that actually means to our communities, I think is important. We're putting labs by housing, by our community. I want to know what that looks like, just for the city and its vulnerabilities. With that.
Thanks. I have a bunch of comments. I'll try to keep this organized. On parking, I support the recommendations to lower parking requirements and wonder if while we're amending these parts of the codes, would we want to allow other businesses to have lesser parking requirements, or is that a moot point because state law is now kind of doing away with parking requirements? But that's just a thought, is maybe we want to, like, if we're making it easier on R&D uses, like maybe we also want to ease parking requirements for other kinds of businesses as well while we're doing this. I'm not sure I want to completely do away with this biosafety lab levels, BSL sort of hierarchy, but there was something kind of funny in the existing code where it says BSL 3 is not allowed anywhere, but it didn't say anything about BSL 4, so it just seems like, it does seem like 3 is maybe this cutoff where like 3 and up we don't want to allow, especially not with a zoning certificate, but it seems like BSL levels 1 and 2, I think I'm somewhat convinced that they can, like as long as they're complying with all the applicable laws, like we don't need to freak out too much about them being in close proximity to residences. But somehow I like having it in the zoning code, because then maybe we have the power to revoke someone's zoning certificate if they're like not complying with the safety standards for all these applicable things. So I don't know, I'll let staff take those comments and try to come up with something sensible. I also was wondering about the 20,000 square foot threshold, and it seems just like very arbitrary to me, and I'm wondering if we want to make the zoning certificate versus AUP distinction based more on like what are the likely impacts of the particular use. Like if there are some laboratory uses that use more like hazardous materials, maybe they're higher up on this BSL scale, or maybe there's more heavy duty equipment being used that might create noise concerns, or like, I don't know, maybe like think about if there are other like intensities of use or like impacts on the surrounding neighbors that might warrant an AUP as opposed to just the number of square feet, because that seems very arbitrary to me. And then I know when the definition of R&D came up before, some of the same concerns as were expressed just now in the public comment about kind of manufacturing in West Berkeley, and like specifically like food businesses and like craft beer and wine, and we have a lot of really kind of amazing kinds of manufacturing going on. I actually was at an event before COVID that the Office of Economic Development organized that was really promoting all the amazing like food and beverage businesses we have in West Berkeley. So I share that concern about if we're maybe overly zealous about promoting R&D in West Berkeley, like we could jeopardize some of those businesses when their lease expires. The landlord might figure out, I could rent this space to some, biotech company for double the rent. Like that would be a really unfortunate and I think unintended consequence of all of this, but that is very concerning to me. So I am kind of more enthusiastic about this whole general proposal in like the Telegraph area, maybe like parts of University closer to campus, it just feels like a better fit for me. I do have concerns about West Berkeley and all the other kinds of like very unique and wonderful, but maybe not like extremely profitable kinds of businesses that we have there and that we want to protect. So those are my thoughts and my concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned myself about that displacement, just looking at the map and seeing where these are and seeing where the proposed changes are and kind of thinking about what are the existing buildings there now. If this isn't a proposal to redevelop, it won't necessarily immediately cause redevelopment. The first step will be what does the building stock now provide? And when I think about kind of what's on those corridors, there's actually, most of it seems like it's not suited to doing this. There's a few places that are. So I'm a little less concerned actually about some of the conflicts or this sort of taking space, just because it seems that it sort of needs maybe some different kinds of spaces. Also, these are small businesses, a lot of them we're talking about too. I spent 5 years in kind of a light design and prototyping business, trying to start it up and sort of skating in between what we thought was allowed in the space. And I really actually appreciate the impact of uncertainty in my experience and kind of what it had as an impact on our business plans. I guess the comments I would add are, I'm excited about the potential for this to activate these corridors. I mean, I'm really concerned about, what are these folks who would be in these businesses doing for lunch and for, their commute, and how are they occupying these corridors and providing the kind of public life and activation that we want to see in them. So I'm not really sure there's a question or a recommendation for me there, just to kind of, I think, maybe externalize amenities and make sure that these are really just using the space, but not, I wouldn't want to see a big company come in and have its own canteen. I'd want to see it using the street to have its workers have a place to go. And the 20,000 square foot actually threshold to me seems in line with the fabric and character of the streets. So generally feeling like kind of, I don't know, my attitude with zoning is permissive is best and less is better, as long as we're not creating a harm. And I kind of feel like this seems like something that generally doesn't, I'm not convinced of the potential harm of having these businesses on the corridors. I do think there's something about the North Shattuck extension that makes a lot of sense. It's really closer to campus than most of the area of San Pablo. So if we're just talking about kind of creating a connection between West Berkeley and campus, it seems like maybe that kind of, there's more logic for that. But the zoning is the same across all of the San Pablo corridor, so I get that too. Yeah, and then I guess my last question is, I'm still sort of trying to understand maybe what the long-term consequences of this could be in the market where we are trying to prioritize housing on these corridors and adding this new use. And what is the potential interaction there? It doesn't seem like there's a potential interaction with existing buildings, but maybe in the future when this use is allowed and it starts to push the market, if there's redevelopment happening towards these uses over other things, it's not a big concern, it's a question, sort of, how does that interact with our other goals as a city? I'll pass it on.
Great. Okay, thank you all on this side. I think maybe I'll go last, so maybe Commissioner Twitt, you're up.
Sure. First, I would agree that adding the North Shattuck makes a lot of sense. It's closest to the northwest corner of campus where most of the biotech facilities are currently located. I do agree that we should be wary of R&D competing with housing for potential sites where someone may decide, rather than replace this the empty commercial building with housing, we're going to just rent it out as a R&D. I think Oakland has an interesting way of dealing with this tension between commercial and residential uses, where the density limit for them are separate. And so you can maximize your commercial use and maximize your housing use, and therefore do more than if you just did one or the other. And that helps relieve that issue. The parking one, I agree, that makes a lot of sense, and we should probably do the same for other types of businesses as well. And on the PSL issue, I agree that should be fine. We don't really need to put that in our zoning code.
Thank you, Commissioner Cook. Commissioner Nelson.
So I want to thank you for leading us through all of the process that you are going through, the ones you have gone through. I think even just showing that the city has this level of responsiveness and is using this level of intel from the actual practitioners and business owners, operators of these types of businesses and uses, shows that Berkeley is competitive and is really promising. I mean, having that kind of channel of listening between public and private sector is really valuable. So totally commend staff for approaching it this way. Looking at, I think I wanted to second elevate what Commissioner Murphy was saying about what is this going to look like within our commercial corridors, and how can we leverage the presence of R&D and job centers, additional jobs, additional activity for the best use, the best impact for our other small businesses, vacant storefronts, struggling restaurants, these types of things. So how that can be a really positive presence. So yeah, putting in things in place like that, a on-site cafeteria, encouraging people to get out and be embedded in these commercial districts that our zoning changes are allowing the uses to occupy where they didn't before. Along the lines of questioning why, North Shattuck, great, seems like a great location, a lot of compatible uses there. Is college just too kind of small scale? Are there not enough existing buildings that would lend themselves to R&D uses? Just kind of looking across Berkeley at all of our commercial districts that are eligible for this use, is college just sort of out of the question? Or
I think you're speaking about the CE, which is the Commercial Elmwood District on College Avenue?
Well, I mean, and a corridor that leads to the university is a commercial corridor that is very a great connection to campus. Just curious if it was considered as a potential.
It wasn't referenced in the initial Keep Innovation in Berkeley referral.
Yeah.
And it hasn't come up a lot. Actually, this is the first time we're talking about College Avenue, to date with the stakeholders.
Yeah.
I know just offhanded from our OED vacancy database, which is our shoe leather database of ground floor commercial spaces, there's not a lot of spaces that are over 2,000 square feet in the CE, for example. But it doesn't. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Just not leaving any sort of commercial district unturned.
I think it's something we could look at. There's no necessarily demand for it that we've heard, but
and also I would question the minimum amount of square feet that are
and sometimes they look for very small. I've had a number of companies looking for 700 to 1,000 square feet.
Right, it's just a place that's not your house to be in. That's then you have jobs closer to homes. And
somebody's doing a prototype and testing something. They just want a little workshop. They're actually. There's one, I think they're more telegraphed than all, but they're just, they live down the street and they just want a place to build their AV testing work.
That's all I've got.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Hellman. Alternate Commissioner Allen, is that right? What's the name? Substitute? What is the technical? Sorry, say it again. Temporary. Yes. Temporary Commissioner Allen. Last but not least.
Public commissioner.
Yeah, I think the appointment is temporary, but she is a commissioner.
Yes.
Temporary describes the appointment, not the commissioner.
Commissioner Allen.
She's a permanent person.
It is yours.
Phew, I'm glad we got that all set. I was nervous there for a minute. So I'm just going to go through my notes, and there you can reorganize them however you like. How I started thinking about this was by each district. So I thought, okay, CT Telegraph. All right, it's in the purpose of the district. There's language around goods and services, culture, housing. There's some regulations in there that look at housing, or excuse me, office, where it faces Bancroft versus office where it's on Telegraph. So I would like consideration if it makes the same sense given the work, the higher density residential and the rezoning that's happened on the south side of campus. I have not followed. I imagine everybody at your table has. And if there is anything that's come out of that upzoning that relates to ground floor retail uses or needs and differences between ground floors on Bancroft versus ground floors on Telegraph, please think about that. I don't know the answer. CDMU, similarly adjacent to high density residential. The purpose in that district includes a lot about economic development, and there have been conversations over the years around getting jobs downtown, jobs near BART. So that's a long way of saying I think the changes that are proposed for adding R&D in the CDMU makes a lot of sense. For the CC, which I had to look up to be the commercial district past Telegraph, there's also the purpose of the district to do a variety of activities, encourage development and be compatible. And there's a lot of medical office down that corridor, which in my mind is like lab or is like R&D, and that seems, well, not as close to campus, seems like a real logical place for that kind of use. And looking at the CU, and that's, I was gonna say up and down this university, but that's not really true. This is another district that has purpose language about economic development, housing, revitalization, but then it's also got, protect and improve the neighborhood and the quality of life. So that's where, on the CU, there are nodes, and I would like us to look at protection of nodes and focus commercial uses at nodes and R&D allowed everywhere else. These, like San Pablo Avenue, University, I'm like, our commercial corridors are long, and it's not realistic to have ground floor commercial uses along an entire San Pablo Avenue. That's my perception as a layperson in Berkeley, that that's ground floor commercial along a long corridor like that isn't realistic. So encouraging different uses and providing streamlined processes for R&D is, I think that's a good idea. So I'm a little stumped on the CW though. That too has commercial nodes, and I would want to preserve commercial nodes. But I don't see the language and the purpose of the CW as economic development. It doesn't lend itself to that focus in my mind or in my read of it. And I'm a little concerned, but I think it could go both ways. For implementing a change in the CW of saying, well, gosh, we've got the San Pablo area plan that's going on right now. Like, why would we make a zoning change in the area that we're studying? But on the other hand, why not make the change now? And if it doesn't shake out through the study, well, then they can change it some other way. So you could do with that what you like.
That's choice. There's two options.
Yes, those are
Include it
options.
or not include.
Yes, yes. But wait, I have a deep thought though about CW. So that's my not so deep thought. So the CW is the only district that backs up on the M. And so looking at, I'm going to say the University Avenue corridor, but I might be wrong. But University Avenue, I think it has extra setbacks or extra provisions. So it's like, oh, when you're adjacent to a residential use, then you need to do X or Y. So I wonder if in the changes to the CW on San Pablo, if it's kind of like the opposite of that. The question isn't if you're next to a residential, but the question is like, hey, if you're next to Muley, build the crap out of it. That's also a technical zoning term.
Right.
But then where I think, it's my understanding so then you also have lots of residential. You've got I'm not going to get into the residential piece behind the CW, but I think there's an interesting argument or an interesting conversation that could happen around the CW where it's adjacent to the M, because you could do more different. I do think we should consider including transparency requirements in the CT and the CDMU. I can't say enough good things about Pier Bar downtown Berkeley. And they've figured out a way to get that 10 feet of like small retailing desk. So it's a big glass front, but I'm not taking my Pier Bar class in front of anybody that's not in the class with me. So I think your creative people can figure out ways to maintain an active pedestrian experience. I would appreciate more information on the 20,000 square foot limit. I think for two reasons. One is I think that we want to really still encourage R&D in West Berkeley, and that we don't want competition of R&D up in the University Avenue. And so it should be different. If ZC is the standard for 20,000 square feet in the M districts, I think it should be different in the commercial districts, because that's like a second tier preference. And I don't know the commissioner's name. Yeah, but
Merker.
Commissioner Merker. So Commissioner Merker has an understanding of, you said I get 20,000 square feet seems right. That seems like the average parcel size.
I don't know that it did. The fact that there was a threshold.
I was like, I don't have that understanding of how big the parcels are along these different corridors as they stand, and I know it's hard for developers to get them together by neighboring parcels. So if there was just kind of like a little ground truthing of, gosh, the average size parcel on these corridors is 20,000 square feet, therefore it makes great sense because that's the ground floor that we're looking to get folks in. If it was something like 15 or 10, then that would help ground truth it again and also make sure there's not that competition, real or perceived, with new development in West Berkeley. Don't worry, I really am wrapping up. And then sort of going off of Commissioner Oatfield's comment, and maybe, related to 20,000 square feet, if there is a difference, if it becomes more intense, and so what I've seen with some R&D is maybe you've got bigger HVAC systems, or you have storage systems. So is there a difference between, maybe there's just another way to come at what's the right square footage. So if I've got 10,000 square feet, then I need an HVAC system that's this size and only needs this kind of muffling shelter around it. But gosh, the second I go over that it's twice that. I think there could be some good information there to help form that base. I already said that I liked that. I like the idea of looking at North Shattuck. That too is, it's close by, and there's multiple large university buildings on Shattuck now. So we should keep that open. I also want to second the comment that's been made by a couple of commissioners about being mindful not to compete with housing. You know, R&D has this higher land value, and we want to make sure that we are, you know, the work that we've been doing to streamline housing, promote housing, facilitate housing, all the things we can do except build housing, that we're still keeping that as a priority. Yeah, I think that's it. This was exciting. Thank you guys for letting me be at your table.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Really great comments. Thank you all. Hopefully, staff, you've gotten some good feedback for your next steps. Just provide a few of my own comments very quickly. I think this is really great work. I appreciate the time and effort that went into this, and particularly, the outreach to firms, to individuals kind of in this space to understand that. I was actually immensely intrigued with the top 25 Berkeley employers, because there's a ton of them on here I would have never guessed. And it just speaks to the interesting innovation in all kinds of sectors going on in the city, which just makes it exciting to both live and work here. But I think, I think what you're putting forth is really in the right direction. And I think, given the innovation that's going on with Cal, I think what you're doing is nurturing what we have and being specific about that. So, personally, I would absolutely support the three main recommendations that you have. I think they're very straightforward and in my opinion, kind of no-brainers. On the BSL, I would support removing that, and the reason is that I attended a number of meetings of the BPEorg Development Agreement working groups, and there was a long discussions about this as related, within that development agreement. Of course, development agreement is a big different thing, but there was a lot of discussion about that, and I think the points you make in the report, there are health and safety regulations at city, state, and federal levels that are very rigorous and detailed on this. And frankly, I think it's unnecessary in the zoning code. And I think, since I've been on the commission many years ago, part of what we tried to do, and ended up doing, is taking a bunch of stuff out of the zoning code, because a lot of stuff is crammed in the zoning code in Berkeley, California, that was perhaps done for good reasons at the time, but it's created really difficult scenarios now. And I think when you've got something like this where it's actually duplicitous in other areas, why are we doing that and making our zoning code even harder to decipher for folks that are trying to do things out there? And the fact that these activities, BSL 1 and 2 in particular, are already happening in busy buildings at UC Berkeley, where people are hanging out and having food and having offices that are sending emails in the same building. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to limit that in this way through the way, in these areas. I would support that as well. This issue of North Shattuck, I would be really interested in seeing your analysis of that. If you thought that made sense. So if presumably you're going to come back to us, I would guess it would be interesting to see a little further analysis on that, given that it's been suggested in the talk you had, the outreach you all did in the community and with folks, but then I know a number of commissioners on here mentioned it as well. So I would be interested in seeing that. And then I think I'll end, I guess, with a question is, and this may dive us too much into the R&D definition, which we've spent a lot of time talking through not so long ago. But this issue of the definition around like laboratory use that one of the speakers brought up, I was just wondering if staff could comment on that as it relates to the R&D definition as it relates to kind of this, your proposals here. So that would be my question. And I'll end on that, and then I'll say if staff has any questions for us to further unpack any of these, to give you all guidance, because you have to take all of this and kind of, move this ball forward. So with that, I'll end and, thank you, but if you could kind of talk about that issue and then if we have any questions for us.
Yeah, so in my discussion with the zoning officer today about this, distinction between laboratory and a research and development use, again, a really important distinction is that in an R&D use, you could have a laboratory use that's co-located with other uses, warehousing, light industrial manufacturing. A laboratory is primarily a laboratory like that would, for example, test blood samples that are received from a hospital, for example. That would be
so it's got a biological connection, is that, or
it's more about how exclusive it is as a use, that it's not co-located with other uses. But there is some room for ambiguity. And so I understand that that's difficult, but like laboratory, a laboratory as a primary use, for example, would not include the warehousing, any light industrial aspects that are mentioned in the R&D definition.
Just a food for thought, adding on, thank you, Justin, for that answer. Another way to come at that might be to look at the levels of discretion for lab and where it's permitted. And I could see that as a very separate effort, whether it's a referral from council about that topic or a request from you all to look at that in the line. That's another way to make some clarity sometimes.
Because perhaps the laboratory and the R&D could have the same thresholds. That would, then you could see whichever one is more close to your use. But like someone here raised that there's many medical testing laboratories already in the CT or CC. And so it is a bit confusing to the layperson. So maybe if that was something you were interested in seeing when we come back, we could propose aligning that.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I would encourage you to explore that. And I think I'm safe to say that folks in the community that kind of have some specific questions about this or have examples of things that are trying to be done, they can contact the Office of Economic Development, is my sense. So.
And planning, we're working together.
And planning, excuse me, yes.
If I can.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I know there's somebody on, you can't see behind you.
Yeah, go
so,
ahead.
I mean, that's an interesting question of like, using this as an opportunity to align with similar uses. Because when I was looking at the CT, office, like the triggers for office are like 3,000 and 5,000. I mean, the triggers for office for AUP is incredibly low. And so it seemed odd. Apparently don't have the language for this. But it's like, if you're going to have 3,000 square feet of office, you better go through this process. But if you've got 20,000 square feet of lab, like here's your ZC over the counter. So at the or I should say at the very least, if there is an opportunity to align other ground floor uses to get butts in seats, then please consider that.
Yeah, well, just really quick, you keep mentioning ground floor, but we're not just talking about ground floor here, right?
Right.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because you kept saying that, and I wanted to make sure.
Yes, I understand that you are talking about innovation, but there's But it was also mentioned the vacancy rates at ground floor, so I think there's sort of a subtext of getting uses on ground floors, and then the language around, like, if you're gonna, that's, yes, thank you for.
I just wanted to have it on the record.
But your point is well taken about pegging the square footage to the 3,000 or 5,000 related to office. Like if you wanted to pick that up and give that to us as a suggestion, we could hear that suggestion. I mean,
Can you hear that suggestion in the context of the work that you're doing right now, or do you need to hear that suggestion later? Because in my suggestion, you know what, I have a suggestion.
Okay, Commissioner Allen, let's hear your suggestion.
As you look at similar uses in these C zoning districts, if there is an opportunity to align other uses such as office, or maybe, I'm not going to say lab, somebody else can say lab, I'll say office, please do so. I can't direct you, I can say please consider thinking about it.
Commissioner Rickard, did you have a comment?
I did, and I mean, I think it's been partially said, but just as I've listened to this conversation unfold, I think what is really coming up for me is this issue of scale, and that these corridors are mainly going through they're going through these neighborhoods. And that's what's kind of different, is actually we're thinking about, you know, this kind of new use that's not just in West Berkeley anymore, it's being strung through the city. And I think I'm not, you know, this 20,000 square foot threshold, I'm also curious about it just for scale. I just measured it out. It's the lot that's the American Automobile Association lot on University. That's about 18,000 square feet.
Wait, AAA on
AAA on University.
like McGee or something?
Yeah, just for scale. And I think, so clarification is we're not just talking about lot size, we're talking about use, total square feet of use for 20,000 square feet. But I think the main concern I would have of like the unintended consequence of we open up a new market for something, say, along all of University, where there's just endless money that gets poured into making these large R&D buildings on University, and it just kills it as the possibility of kind of like a neighborhood corridor. Like that's what I wouldn't want to happen if this came to pass. So that's, I think, just maybe re-emphasizing this point of like really, I think aligning it with other uses, because what then that drives is things like how many entrances, how many employees, how much of the facade, you know, is activated by people coming and going. To me, that's a key consideration through these neighborhood corridors that we want to keep consistent with our other goals along the corridor.
But wouldn't there be other, I mean, I hear that and I would agree, but aren't there other land use controls on those corridors that would not allow?
I think so. I mean, I think the ground floor requirements, right, are one, if they, and this doesn't change those. But I think it also, I mean, that the effect of putting, is basically office work. If it were all stories of the building, those aren't residents that are there at night. It's not housing where people are like kind of activating that corridor 18 hours a day. It's more of like, you know, a daytime office work equivalent, which makes why it would make sense to align it with office, I think, office uses. Or align the office uses with this. Anyway, so I hope that wasn't confusing, but I think it's just, for me, it's like, it's about this kind of, what kind of neighborhood context does it create?
Anything else? Okay, any other final comments, Commissioner Tu?
Yeah, because this is going to be a policy that increases the amount of employment we have in our city, this should not pass before the middle housing proposal. So, yeah. Yeah, the middle housing proposal should get passed before this proposal gets passed, so that all the people who are going to be working in these new R&D facilities have somewhere to live.
His suggestion is to bring this back to us at the meeting after middle housing.
When is that?
I'm kidding.
Well, I know that when middle housing was discussed, it was talked about that the demo ordinance should come before middle housing because of the potential pressure on demolition. I think similarly, middle housing should come before the R&D because the R&D will bring in a lot more jobs.
Okay, thank you, staff, planning and OED. Can you give us a sense of kind of next steps on this?
Go ahead, Justin.
The initial plan was to bring back zoning changes for your July meeting for a public hearing then.
Okay.
That was, in my mind, based on the number of questions that I received from the commission. I think we should probably stay with that schedule, and if there are research needs or other things that require us to go for a later meeting, we can give you an update at the next meeting of that.
Okay, great. Okay. Excellent, thank you for that. So let's move on to the next agenda item, which is just additional agenda items. Is there anything to share in those? No? Okay. It's 7:58. I'm going to thank you all, and I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
I will second that.
Commissioner Moore, thank you.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Commissioner Vincent?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Ofield?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Fu?
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser?
Yes.
And Martinson and Vice Chair Phillips are absent. The motion carries and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.